Australians to pay more tax in coming years, even if the government doesn't renege on stage 3 cuts. The smaller banks take on the big four in the deposit market, and a pretty good weekend for auction results. It's Monday, the 10th of October, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. A pretty soggy weekend for those living in New South Wales.
Yeah, certainly was. And I think it's actually, I was just expecting you to open then with how good is today's date? 10-10-22.
11-11-22 I'd go with that, not 10-10-22. Look, I must say, the race at Bathurst was on the weekend, and I'm not a rev head. I appreciate you are to some extent. However, given it was so wet and so much mud, it was just fantastic. Cars going off left, right, and centre. That is the sort of car racing that I can appreciate.
Oh, it is the best kind for spectators because It is, in a word, carnage.
Carnage. That's right.
You can appreciate that even if you don't appreciate the date.
Did you? Because you went to university in Bathurst, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever go to one of the races?
Did I ever pay to go? No. Is there a back way that you can get onto?
Up the mountain?
Yes. I'm aware that there was. I don't know personally, but
I have a friend who.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no better time to be living in Bathurst than on race weekend.
Yep.
Because it's just the atmosphere in town and just the noise is. It's great for like the first while, but then obviously it starts to get to you a little bit, drills into your brain. Anyway, Sean, we are not here to reminisce. We have plenty we need to discuss today because there's actually a fair bit on. You've got a great chat today with John O'Loughlin, who is the Coinbase Australia Country Director.
That's right. That's the largest crypto exchange in the US. It's just shifted out to Australia. Many Australians already use it. And we have a great chat with John about trading cryptos, but a lot more than that, about how the technology behind cryptos and the sector as a whole can really add to the economy. It's a fascinating chat.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's coming up a little bit later on. But the main story this morning, Sean, tax cuts or no tax cuts. It's kind of become the big guessing game in Canberra, hasn't it? And something that we should all worry about because any change to legislation affects 95% of the population. Either way, average tax rates are on the up and, unfortunately, are forecast to reach record highs.
That's right, Michael. Let's start with how much tax we all pay. Average tax rates for wage earners will reach record highs by the end of this decade, no matter whether the Stage 3 tax cuts go ahead. A Federal Treasury analysis reported in the Financial Review says the average tax rate would likely jump above 28% by around 2030 if those tax cuts are scaled back. Now, high inflation and wage growth is pushing employees into higher tax brackets. That's good for the budget bottom line and the national debt because income tax is needed to repay it, but it isn't good for individuals. It's a lot of tax to pay, 28%, and it can certainly be a disincentive for people looking for work. The Stage 3 tax cuts are supposed to address that issue and alleviate some of the pain. But the question is, at a cost of nearly $20 billion a year, can the country afford them? And is it even a good idea given they could well fuel inflation? Mind you, they aren't due to kick in till the middle of 2024, so plenty can happen between now and then.
So will they go ahead? Will the Stage 3 tax cuts actually go ahead, Sean?
On Friday, Treasurer Jim Chalmers pushed the door further ajar on repealing the legislation that in its current form would put about 95% of the population, that's the people that earn between $45,000 and $200,000 on a 30% tax rate. Dr. Chalmers said any tax cuts in the mini budget on 25 October needs to be targeted. But yesterday, Resources Minister Madeleine King disagreed, saying we have no plans to change those Stage 3 tax cuts. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the government's position has not changed its view on the Stage 3 cuts, which it voted for when in opposition and promised to uphold going into the May election. So, Michael, in short, I don't know. It's really hard to work out whether these Stage 3 tax cuts are going ahead. My best guess being the operative word here, is that nothing will change in the budget in 2 weeks because it doesn't have to. The government still has time to make a decision.
Where do we stand internationally, Sean? Is Australia a high taxing jurisdiction specifically when it comes to income tax?
It's not really an easy question to answer because tax arrangements differ across countries, but yes, I suppose is the short answer. Some of the Scandinavian countries and Japan have very high income tax rates. Then the next group, the next cohort, Australia fits into that. There's a bunch of European countries in that as well. The next group down are places like New Zealand and the US. They have lower income tax rates again. Certainly when it comes to corporate tax rates, Australia is at the higher end of the league tables. Michael, I've got to say, I get excited by tax policy. Maybe it's a bit much. We talk about monetary policy and interest rates all the time. The other part of it is fiscal policy, of course, and we're doing this in real time. It's just a great debate to have, to be talking about taxation. Agreed?
Yes, only because it affects so many people. As you say, that 95% of the population would be affected by changes to legislation. So I do agree with you. Just on the sheer weight of numbers there, it is an important, and you have a way of making it a little bit interesting.
Just a little bit.
It's a fine concession, that was. Anyway, moving on. How did local markets finish on Friday, Sean?
The S&P ASX 200 finished down 0.8% to 6,763, wrapping up what turned out to be a pretty good week, really, thanks to the Reserve Bank's decision to lift interest rates by just 25 basis points, not 50 basis points. For the week, the ASX 200 was up about 4.5%. Now, that was the best week in about 2 years. On Friday, the only sector doing much good, though, was energy, thanks to rising oil prices. Origin Energy jumped more than 1%, Santos gained nearly 2%, Karoon Energy leapt more than 9% after the Brazilian government's oil and gas regulator agreed to a reduction in the royalty rate in Karoon's project in that country. Coal miners Whitehaven and New Hope, yet again, hit records. The banks were lower, so did the miners, the tech stocks and the REITs.
And what about international markets?
A bit like the local market, it was a soft end for Wall Street over the weekend, with a strong jobs report showing a 3.5% unemployment rate in the world's largest economy. When people saw that, they thought, maybe interest rates will have to rise by more, and that sent share markets down. In commodity markets, Brent crude is closing in on $100 a barrel. Bad news there. Gold is trading at just under $1,700 an ounce. Coal prices have come off a touch. And the Aussie dollar starts the week at 63.6 US cents.
All right, plenty happening. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the Reserve Bank released its financial stability review on Friday, and it came with plenty of warnings, didn't it?
Yes, and the big one was that rising interest rates on the back of higher inflation will make it difficult for some borrowers to meet debt repayments. In fact, a small cohort is likely to not be able to meet repayments. But overall, households are reasonably well placed to adjust to a period of higher interest rates. That, of course, is in part thanks to accumulated savings in recent years. The bank's base case scenario is that the official interest rate hits what markets are pricing in. That would be another 90 basis points in hikes. Growth slows, unemployment rises somewhat but remains historically low, and property prices fall 10% peak to trough. That's not actually a forecast. It's just kind of the base case that the bank is looking at. The Reserve also said global financial stability risks have increased amid rising rates and greater uncertainty, and there's a greater risk of cyber attacks, and a significant incident could have implications for financial stability.
Sean, interest rates are obviously rising, and a lot of the media tends to focus on mortgage holders, and the news isn't good if you have a mortgage, but it is good for the millions of Australians who rely on term deposits or bond markets or annuities to invest their money.
That's right. And in the term deposit market, which matters particularly to pensioners, looking outside the big banks is proving fruitful. While Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, Westpac and ANZ have quickly lifted mortgage rates in line with Reserve Bank rate hikes, term deposit rates have been much slower to move. Now, that's an opportunity for the smaller banks to woo customers. The banks like term deposits because it provides them with money to then lend out. Macquarie Bank and ING are now offering rates of over 4% on some products, according to CanStar. That's about twice the rate of some of the major banks. The moral of this story, Michael, shop around. You'll be able to get a much better deal than your major bank.
I love the description of smaller banks wooing customers. It sounds so romantic, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Term deposit wooing.
Anyway, Sean, I thought this was an interesting one. The number of occupations where there's an acute shortage of workers has surged to almost 300, which is close to double a year ago.
That's right. It means almost 1 in 3 occupations are experiencing shortages, according to the National Skills Commission's annual skills priority list released last week. Registered nurses, software and application programmers, and aged care and disability carers are the top 3 occupations in demand. There are more than 5,000 job ads open for roles in each area. Next most in demand occupations are construction managers, child carers and motor mechanics. Then come retail managers, chefs, ICT business and system analysts, and metal fitters. Now, the federal government at its Jobs and Skills Summit last month committed an extra $1.1 billion to the TAFE sector to create 180,000 fee-free places to help address the shortage. Still, the shortage grows.
I was listening very carefully, and it doesn't appear that there is a huge demand for podcasters.
No, I think there could be a flood of podcasters out there, I'm afraid.
I think you might be right there. Sean, the national auction clearance rate hit its highest level since May, with bargain hunters seemingly entering the market.
Yes, it was a pretty good weekend. The national preliminary clearance rate for the week hit 63.4%, according to CoreLogic. That's the 6th week in a row above 60%, and that happened even though there was an 11% jump in auction numbers. It's a good outcome for the market, with Melbourne achieving a clearance rate of 68.4%. That was particularly strong. Sydney hit 61.3%. Analysts said there are now buyers in the market, and perhaps spring won't be as poor as initially thought. However, no one is saying we're about to get a big rebound. We're about to see house prices rising again. They're just saying that the pace of slowdown might have slowed down a bit.
Now, I apologise in advance for this, but you know how in real estate, location is kind of the saying. But apparently it seems that location not only matters in the real estate market, but also in the streaming world. That's a very kind of terrible segue, but let's roll with it.
I like it. So when you turn your smart TV on, it's easy to see the big international streaming platforms. So my TV, I turn it on, I see Netflix immediately, I see Disney, I see Apple, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It can actually be harder to see the apps for the free-to-air channels, 7, 9, 10, ABC, SBS, and for Stan, which is Nine's streaming service. Well, Communications Minister Michelle Rowland wants to change that and make sure local TV services can be easily found on connected TV platforms, according to media reports. While there's still a consultation process to go through, it seems like the government wants to give the local networks a helping hand when it comes to smart TVs. So if you buy one and you turn it on, you'll immediately see 7, 9, 10 ABC, SBS and Stan. That's the plan anyway.
Kind of makes sense. Sean, Australians spend on average 3.5 hours a day on unpaid work activities. And guess what? Women do more than men.
That's according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics Time Use Survey released on Friday. Unpaid work includes domestic duties like housework, food and drink preparation and shopping, as well as childcare, adult care and volunteering activities. But, Michael, as you said, females do much more than males, with women spending an average of 4 hours, 31 minutes doing unpaid work activities and men spending 3 hours, 12 minutes a day doing it. That's a big gap. On average, people spent about 5.5 hours a day on free time activities. That includes social interaction, recreation, and leisure activities. 3/4 of people reported watching television or video for an average of nearly 3 hours a day. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? 75% at 3 hours a day. 30% of respondents spent time doing exercise, sport, and outdoor activities for about an hour and a half, Michael. And I say Michael because it's clearly you.
Okay, that is clearly not me. They did not speak to me for this survey. I would be delivering vastly different results if it was based on me. And finally, Sean, in the fight between aluminium cans and glass bottles, it seems cans are coming out on top, with 70% of beverages now in tins.
And that's in part thanks to a new breed of alcoholic seltzers, kombucha, and craft beer. The boss of Aurora, Brian Lowe, says the Australian market is likely to follow North America, where 70% of all new beverage products in the past year were in aluminium cans, according to a report in the Financial Review. He said 5 years ago, cans represented less than 50% of new product launches in North America, but thinner, slimline cans are in demand in the alcoholic seltzer industry, which is the fastest growing segment of the alcohol sector. It's benefiting from the push of the better-for-you alcohol products with no sugar and low carbs. Craft beer makers have also shifted further towards cans. Aurora has 8 factories in Australasia and 14 in North America across its operations. And guess what? It's investing heavily in can production.
All right, moving on to overseas news, Sean, and an explosion tore through the main bridge connecting Russia with Crimea. And while Ukraine didn't claim responsibility, it did hail the bridge's collapse.
The bridge across the Kerch Strait was severely damaged and at least 3 people were killed. It's a blow to Russian President Vladimir Putin 7 months after he first invaded Ukraine. Russia said it could continue to use the bridge, though parts of it remain closed. Now, the biggest impact will be on Russia's supply chain to troops in Ukraine. So it is a setback for Moscow.
And China is being hit by a new round of COVID cases following the week-long National Day holiday and just ahead of the meeting of the Communist Party Congress.
The country recorded more than 1,600 cases on Saturday. Now, that's the highest since the 2nd of September. It doesn't sound like a lot to us, but you've got to keep in mind Beijing is still following a zero-tolerance policy. There have been cases in Beijing and Shanghai outside of quarantine, which suggests it may be spreading. It comes 1 week ahead of the 3,000 delegates gathering in Beijing to attend the once every 5 years Congress that will hand President Xi Jinping a 3rd successive term.
Okay, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. We mentioned it at the top of the show. John O'Loughlin, Coinbase Australia Country Director.
Yep, all about investing in cryptos and beyond.
And of course, don't forget the week ahead as well with Sherelle Murphy from EY.
Yes, Sherelle is stepping in for Stephen Koukoulas. Have a great chat about what's going on. This week we've got consumer confidence and business confidence, but we talk about what happened with the rates last week and how the economy is tracking.
Yeah, they're both coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 10th of October, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.